Video games have come a long way since the days of Pong. Nowadays, video games strive for realism in both graphics, experience, combat, and even interaction monetarily. Now, before I begin, this video itself is not arguing whether the ability to use real-world money in video games is good or bad. It's just presenting the info as it is. Before I begin to do that, there are a couple terms I want to specify first. Those first terms being usable, which is going to be defined as playable characters, usable vehicles, and other consumable items. Another term is going to be pay to win. This is a term that's become sort of a colloquialism in the video game world, used to coin a situation where the game itself is structured so that paying real money gains you the upper hand over other players, or is another alternative to get an item aside from massive grinding or farming. Farming itself meaning collecting in-game resources or materials. This is going to fall into two main categories. Game changing, which is going to have a massive effect on gameplay, be it positive or negative, or is needed to even stand a chance in game. And then there's going to be surface feature. This is going to be no real effect on gameplay, and as the name leads it to sound, aesthetic. Now, part of the reason why money in games is game changing is because, for the most part, items that you can purchase with money have less overall balance, which means that the item that you pay $5 for is going to have a bigger effect in the game than the item that you grinded 5 hours for. Now, for this, there's going to be two main sections. There's going to be in-game currency itself and loot boxes, both of which I'll explain when I get to them. Starting off with in-game currency, there's usually two types. There's the standard in-game currency, which is earned by completing missions in the game, playing the game itself, or finding items in the game. Then there is premium currency. This is a currency that is purchased with real-world money and can be spent in the game, usually in some form of in-game shop. Some examples of this are R6 credits from Rainbow Six Siege, Golden Eagles from the game War Thunder, Gold from the game World of Tanks, and Platinum from the game Warframe. Now, from what you can see, for the most part, a lot of these premium currencies will tend to have the name of some form of rare metal, or like the name currency. So for Battlefield, you have Battlefield coin or something along those lines. Now, some game-changing examples of real-world to in-game currency and its effect on games is the biggess one that comes to mind is World of Tanks. This was a game created by Wargaming, gained popularity back in 2010, and it essentially allows you to play as tanks. The reason that this is an example is because the game itself, there are these things called premium tanks, which can be purchased with real-world money or gold. Now, the issue with these premium vehicles is that they are light years ahead of stats compared to their normal variants. Their armor is thicker, their guns do more damage, and for the most part, they tend to have other boosted stats as well, be it movement, turret rotation, etc., etc., etc. This has an effect on the gameplay because, as stated in an article titled The Hidden Cost of Microtransactions by Ellen Evers, Niels van de Vatten, and D. Wida, it states that, as explained before, players who gain an undeserved advantage are likely to be resented by other players. Undeserved advantages can also trigger malicious envy. This basically creates a pay-to-win scenario because essentially means I could walk in, pay 15 bucks, and I now have the upper hand against someone who didn't want to pay 15 bucks. Now, there is somewhat of a balancing mechanism for this for people who want to stick with normal vehicles, which is called premium ammo. But the way the normal game itself has been going, premium ammo is needed to penetrate almost anything. Premium ammo itself can be purchased with gold or with a high amount of the normal in-game currency. Now, what you can also purchase with gold is in-game currency. So this essentially forces you into a scenario where even though more and more people are using premium vehicles, it still forces those who don't want to pay to use premium ammo, ergo they use more in-game cash, ergo it puts them into a situation where at the end of the day, they're still going to have to pay gold. This model applies to another article that I found on this topic titled The Effects of Microtransactions in the Video Games Industry. Now, what this article states is that in multiplayer games, microtransactions bring a privileged position to a player who pays and then discriminates against players who do not pay. Now, some surface examples of this real-world to in-game currency are coming games like Rainbow Six Siege, Battlefield, Fortnite, and Overwatch. These games themselves, you can purchase items with real-world cash. However, these items are only aesthetic. The gameplay itself depends entirely on the player's skill. All these items do is to set you and your character apart from the crowd. And to again quote the effects of microtransactions on the video games industry, many players accept only cosmetic microtransactions, such as those in games like The Division or those that I previously mentioned, because they believe that all other forms of in-game purchases create an imbalance. Everything else is there's no boosted stats, though in Rainbow Six Siege it could be argued that aesthetics can sometimes change the battle just purely because of the realism that that game is based on. Though for the most part, all it really serves is to make you look different. Now the other section of this discussion is loot boxes. What these are boxes that contain randomly generated items. They could be on a scale of common to legendary or exotic. And how they work is you can either buy them with real world money or you earn them by playing the game. And when you open them, they will grant you it all depends on the game really, between 1 to 4 of these items. Now, some of the game-changing examples have unfortunately given loot boxes themselves a very bad name. And because of this subsequent bad rap that they have gotten due to the actions of a few larger companies, and according to the paper titled Video Game Loot Boxes Are Linked to Problem Gambling, result of a large-scale survey by David Zendele and Paul Cranes, it states that earlier this year, Belgium Gambling Commission ruled that some loot boxes were in violation of national gambling legislation. More specifically, they ruled that any loot box that can be paid for with real-world money constituted as a form of gambling, and have ordered that they be removed from video games in Belgium. One of the games that fell under this new legislation was a game titled Star Wars Battlefront 2, the most recent one. This was a game released by DICE and Electronic Arts, and right out the gate, it gained a reputation for being extremely grindy, but there was a way out of the grind. Ye old credit card. Essentially, players found that your options were either you could pay $5 to get some loot boxes, or sit there for 5 hours just to grind for one loot box. This caused the game itself to be heavily essentially based on loot boxes, where, I mean, yeah, you could gain characters and stuff by playing, but it took you hours upon hours of just playing, and for the most part, everyone else just kind of either, took to the internet and ranted about this, or coughed up the cash and kept playing. But unfortunately, for the some who kept playing, this would harm them even more than they could think, especially those with gambling addictions. Going back to the article by Zendel and Cairns, it states that problem gambling is thought to often be caused by individuals being conditioned by the arousing features of gambling to the point that their need for excitement of gambling becomes harmful to both themselves and others. There is reason to believe that such conditioning may occur with the use of loot boxes. This actually, because of this, in other games like FIFA that follow this similar model, Electronic Arts has actually has a case against them in Belgium, where Belgium is suing the developers of FIFA as well as some of the higher ups. Now, some surface examples of the loot box example come from games like Overwatch, where for the most part, it's all cosmetic. The skill itself, everything just depends on the player's skill. Like I just mentioned earlier, all that these do is serve to set your character apart from others, with Overwatch setting itself apart from other games as well by the fact that you already own all the characters in game. Now, there's another side example that kind of falls under this purview, with that example being community markets. The two most prominent examples I could think of with this were Counter-Strike Global Offensive, colloquially known as CSGO, and Warframe. What these two games have are presidents call a community market, where users take items that they've gotten by playing the game. For the most part, these will be rarer items, and they will go online to a sort of forum, and they will then sell these items for either premium currency in the game or real-world money. With CSGO, there is a big market for this, for skins, loot cases, as well as keys to open those loot cases, where essentially it's kind of seen as the skins themselves become a signifier of experience. So some people will, at the end of the day, end up spending money in these community markets. Some will not. It's really, for the most part, variant upon the individual. Now, remember, this isn't pointing out the good or the bad. This is just the information as it stands. I mean, at the end of the day, the video game world is changing, and for the most part, developers do try to listen to their audience. So, anything that's said here, I mean, it is 2019, so anyone looking at this in 2020 could, 2020, 2022 could possibly see a difference. But just remember, folks, you don't need to spend money to have fun.